So we're just going to examine this Year 9 tourism task, which is a made-up course, but this task has been based on a number of real tasks that have been given in Term 1 from Marist College. So what we want to do is we want to scroll down and we want to pick out some of the features of this task. We want to look at some of the strong points, and then we want to look at some of the areas that might need some work or some investigation or some discussion. And we would like to look at it from two perspectives. The first perspective is from the student's perspective. What is the student being asked to do? And is that amount of work fair? Are they capable of doing it? And are they easily able to have a look at the marking criteria and see how to get full marks? Because that's what we want them to achieve, to get full marks in an assessment task if they're capable of doing that. The second thing we want to look at is from the teacher's perspective. Is the teacher putting too much work on themselves or maybe not enough work? So we want to look at that, and we also want to see when the teacher goes to the marking criteria, are they able to look at that and award full marks to a student where it's appropriate? So they're the two perspectives that we're going to have a look at. So we'll scroll down, and the first thing that we can see over here is that their student is required to do two things. They're required to do a report, and they're required to make a speech, or as it says over here, an oral presentation. So we're going to have a look at that. Scrolling further down then, we can see from the description of the task that they've got to research one significant world city. They have to complete that detailed report we talked about and have to present an oral presentation. So straight away I can see that the student has been asked to do three different things here really. And I'm assuming this is a 10-week unit of work. So they're being asked to research. So that's something that we would need to model and make sure they're able to do. They're being asked to complete a detailed report, which I guess we'll get some more information on in a couple of minutes. And they're asked to do an oral presentation. So straight away I'm thinking that's a lot of things that we have to then model and teach for those students if it's going to be done properly, as well as teaching them all the actual content of this particular topic. Scrolling down a little further, we just see when the submissions are. So the report is to be submitted in week 7. The oral presentations then start in week 8. So I'm guessing they're going to be submitted between week 8 and week 9. Now, going back to what I just said, if we're going to model oral presentations and model those skills, it doesn't give us a whole lot of time to do that. But maybe we have time to model it earlier in the course. But then the question is, when do we get to model the report and teach the content and so on? So straight away, I'm thinking maybe we should only be doing one of these things. Is this two things in one that this assessment task is requiring? Is it actually two tasks in one? Scrolling further down then we can see it just gives a bit of context, a bit of feedback so the students will receive during the research and so on. I'm not really going to dwell on that too much. I guess it's good up here. It says they'll receive verbal feedback, which basically means that I'm guessing the teacher then will be showing them some research skills, which is a good thing. But again, we'd have to have a look at the program and see where that is built in. Scrolling down, it gives a list of some of the world tourist cities that they actually have to research. And again, I'm not particularly concerned with that. I think it's good that they're given ones. What I'd also say is, are we as teachers going to model how to research one of these cities? So for example, am I going to pick Prague in the Czech Republic up here, or one that isn't in this assessment task, and model that one? And again, if I'm not, are we really leaving the students then open to trying to do all this work themselves, which could be a very difficult task for them to do unless research has been built in over the last couple of tasks or last year and so on, but that's going back a bit in time. Scrolling down further, we can see then that we've got a scaffold. And so this scaffold is then based on a report. So let's look what the students have to do. Well, the first thing they've got to do is they've got to describe. Okay, so they've got to use the language of description. They've then got to investigate the origins of tourism in the world city. So investigate, I'm guessing that again is part of research. But how is that supposed to be written out? Is that a bullet point list? Is that description? Is it an explanation? It doesn't really make it clear. They've got to outline, which is a fairly, I suppose, basic skill. They should be able to do that. They've then got to summarize. So now we've got to look at the benefits of tourists in a city. We've got to summarise that. And again, how is that presented? In what way? What does a summary mean, I guess? Is that more the language of description? It doesn't really make it clear here for the students. But straight away, I can see they've got to do 4 things. They've then got to do some calculation, 5 things. They've got to state, which is a bit like identify, but that still is a different skill. That's 6. Identify down here, so that's the same thing as state, I guess. They've got a list, very similar to identify. They've then got to predict. So again, what type of language should they be using when they predict these 2 barriers? And they've then got to provide some other information, and they've then got to draw a conclusion. So again, we're looking at around 6, 7, 8 different writing skills that the students have to perform for this particular task. And again, we'd have to go back and look at the program and see, well, are these writing skills embedded in the program? And if they're not, why can we assume that students can do all these and get full marks? And If they are embedded in the program, do we realistically have time in a 10-week program to teach all of these writing skills, to teach how to research, and to teach how to do an appropriate oral presentation? And the honest answer is, well, probably not. Maybe over the course of the year we can build these skills up, but certainly not in one term. Scrolling further down, let's have a look now at the marking criteria. So the marking criteria is laid out, I'm guessing, in terms of report: excellent, thorough, sound, basic, and elementary. And let's just have a look at what you've got to do for excellent. So to get 9 or 10 marks, to get almost full marks or full marks, you've got to demonstrate a thorough understanding of the world city. So my first question is, if I'm a student, what does that mean to me? It doesn't mean a whole lot. I don't know how long it is. I don't know exactly what is required of me. I guess I can use the scaffold, and maybe that would be the thorough understanding. I then have to critically analyse the tourist information. Now, the first question I'd be asking here as a teacher is, well, if I go back up here to my scaffold, nowhere in that scaffold is the word analyse or critically analyse put in. So all of a sudden, I'm asking a student to do all these different things in a scaffold, but yet they get 9 or 10 marks, I'm asking them to critically analyse, which is not mentioned. If I scroll down to 7 or 8 marks, I'm asking them to analyse. Again, that has not been mentioned in the scaffold. If I scroll down here to 5 or 6 marks, which we would say is a C grade because it's sound, again, I'm asking the students to analyse or attempt to analyse. And again, there's no reference in the scaffold. So realistically, if I'm a teacher and I'm going by this marking criteria, most students should be falling in here, in between 1 and 4, unless just by chance they happen to analyse. So again, we really have to ensure that this marking criteria asks what we need to do. So just scrolling back up again, they need to give an excellent description of the world city. And again, what does that mean? If we scroll back up here, they're asked to do a lot more than describe. They're asked to predict down here in this part. They're asked to summarize. We said that might be the language of description. They're asked to investigate. What type of language is that? So really, there isn't a very strong correlation between what they're asked to do and the actual marking criteria. And finally, then they're asked to accurately cover all the content in the scaffold. Well, if they're asked to accurately cover all the content in the scaffold, then I'm just wondering what all of these are for. I mean, is this extra work that they've got to do? And so that's what I'm really trying to say. How can a student know how to get 9 or 10 marks unless this marking criteria accurately reflects what they're asked to do up in the task, whether it's back up here or whether it's down here in the scaffold, but it's got to do that. And secondly, remember, this is just the report. The student then has to go off and do the oral presentation, as well as doing the initial research to do this. So a couple of things I draw out from this are that there's too much in there. I would go back up here, if I was to be honest, and I would probably scratch the oral presentation. That doesn't mean I wouldn't do it. I could do that as an informal, as an assessment for learning, and assessment as learning task, and that way I could really build up their skills. And I might even do it on parts of the scaffold. Perhaps they could present little parts of this, and that way then we're building up their oral presentation skills without formally assessing it. The second thing I would definitely do is I would limit some of these. Having outlining, I think, is fine. Having state or identify, all those are fine. They're fairly straightforward. But really then, do we want the students to describe? Is that what we want? That's the language of description. We should focus then on one term teaching the language of description. Maybe we want them to explain in our report. We should then focus on the language of explanation for the whole term. But I don't think we should have lots and lots and lots of different types of writing in there, or language features as they're called, because I think that will only confuse the students. The final thing I'd say is this scaffold is good. It's good to have a scaffold. But unless we actually then scaffold it ourselves or model it in the classroom, it isn't a whole lot of use, because if students don't know how to investigate, if they don't know how to describe properly, if they don't know how to summarize, then this scaffold isn't going to be a whole lot of value to them unless we have taught them how to do that in the actual classroom.